Thank you, Zoom. So yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to the quickest hour of my week, these webinars. It's been a while. The last webinar I did was back in late June. And then I was flat out in July and August, and then September was my rest month. And I'm back on the horse now, doing corporate trainings and gearing up for our next round of NLP and ICF starting in November. Thank you all for joining us today. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to Coachology. And I can see very many familiar faces. So welcome back to our wonderful Coachology community. Wonderful to see you all here again. All right, let me just quickly push a mute button there. Okay, very good. So let's jump in today, guys. I've got some good content for you today about how to create your strategic plan. Now, when you think about your strategic plan, it might simply be your personal individual action plan for something that you want to create, a certain goal in your life. Perhaps you want to start your business or get promoted, or perhaps you are the leader of a certain department in an organization and you want to create a strategic plan for your team, which could be a small team of 5 to 10 people, or it could be a big team of 20 plus. Or you may want to create the strategic plan for your big organization, right? If you're the MD or the GM or the principal of a big organization or institute, you may want to create a strategic plan for the whole organization. Whichever level you want to create your strategic plan, you'll be able to use this same kind of format and process that we are discovering today. So without further ado, let me push. Whoop, sorry about your eardrums there. Very good. Okie dokie. So here is our agenda for today. But just before we get into that quickly,
new visitor.
Let me just have a look at my computer here. It's a little bit grumpy today. All right. On our YouTube channel, guys, there's a ton of free resources and webinars that we've delivered in the past. Check it out if you haven't already. Go ahead and subscribe. You'll get updated with any new content there. Here's our agenda for today, business success. And again, that business simply might be for yourself. To create success for yourself is 80% mindset, right? And then 20% strategy. So we're going to deep dive on that a little bit. Developing a mental agility in challenging times. Well, guess where that mental agility comes from? It's inside of that 80% mindset, right? So if you face challenges and problems and they're inevitably going to happen, then you need to have that mindset to be able to adapt and to adjust. You need that agility to be able to adjust as necessary. We're going to look at a process called chunking. And chunking is from the world of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And we're going to look at how chunking relates to your strategic thinking and then therefore your strategic planning. Being flexible. In fact, we can address this point right now, guys. When you are setting your goals, whatever your goals might be, your personal, professional, the big strategic plan, you may have heard some people say, you've got to set the goal and you can't change it and you've got to do whatever you need to do to achieve the goal. Yeah, okay. I'm not such a firm believer in that philosophy. I think you need to be able to be flexible, both in the goal that you want to achieve and more importantly, on the action plan on how to get there. So just realize that your plan or even your goal may not be set in stone. Interestingly, many, many years ago when I was living in Australia, I had the dream. I wanted to own a pub. Can you remember those places where you could go to and have a drink and a meal with your good friends? Remember those? They're still closed here in Bangkok. I remember those days, and I thought, as a 20-something kid, I thought, I want to own a pub. That sounds so cool. Well, then I went backpacking around the world, and I ended up in a little town called Salisbury in the UK, and I worked in a pub pulling beers. And I can tell you after that experience, I did not want to own a pub anymore. So it's okay to change your goal and it's okay to change the plan to achieve your goal. Then in summary, we're going to look at 5 effective tips on how you're going to create your strategic plan. As always, guys, if you have any questions or anything, just drop them into the chat box as we go through. I'll be delighted to answer any questions if we have time. This framework that I'm sharing with you today, guys, is exactly the same process that I use with multinational organizations, from those big, literally, guys, billion-dollar companies right through to the one-on-one clients that I work with, whether they're the CEO, MD, or anyone. Now, of course, we've only got 1 hour together today, so I can't go into all of the details. Yet this framework that we're going to discover today, and the kind of the mindset behind it, is the exact same principles I'm using with these big companies all around the region, all around the world. So to create your strategic plan starts with a thought, right? You need to begin to think about the goals that you want to achieve. And then you need to be able to, once you've begun the thinking process,
new visitor,
you need to begin to plan what it is that you want to do. Now, between your thinking and your planning, you're going to need to make some kind of decisions, right? So as you're thinking and you're gathering data and information, because you need to kind of look at where you are now, and then you need to look at where you want to be, right? That's this. What is a strategic plan? It's how to get from point A to point B. Again, whether it's for your personal plan or your department or the entire organization, this process is very similar. So you need to think about it, you need to plan it, and then you need to take action. And that is what's going to achieve your results, okay? Now, we're not going to focus too much on the action side today. That might be another webinar down the track. But certainly we're going to look at the thinking components of creating your strategic plan. And then we're going to look at how can you begin to plan it and map it out, because that is what's going to get you from point A to point B. So business success is 80% mindset, 20% strategy. Now, I got to admit, when I heard this the first time, and I actually heard this from Tony Robbins, at some of his seminars around the world. At first, I thought, oh, yeah, really? You think? I don't, and I actually didn't think it was true. Now, let me clarify why, in fact, this is the minimum. You know, it could be even 90 to 95% mindset is going to result in your business success. And I remember going to Tony Robbins' business mastery event in Sydney many years ago. And I got lucky. He was talking to the audience and he asked somebody to stand up as a volunteer. And I put my hand up and he said, "You stand up." And I was like, whoa. So I stood up and they ran the microphone over to me. And he was talking me through the business. I was running another business at that time. I was the managing director. And then he asked this question. Now, if you are in a leadership role, I want you to ask yourself this same question. And in fact, I want you to put the answer into the chat box. In your business, whatever business, whether you're working alone, you're a small team or a massive company, who is the bottleneck in your business? So the bottleneck is the restriction. The bottleneck is where things slow down and kind of get stuck. So who is the bottleneck in your business, guys? If you'd like to have a guess at the answer, go ahead and pop it into the chat box. I'll give you 30 seconds. Who is the bottleneck in your business? And guys, whether you're a school or an institute or a business or whatever wherever you're working. Okay, let's get a couple of answers up there. Okay, so we've got a hi from Bangkok and good evening. Thank you. I, me, and myself, Leanne, I love it. The ones that have a fixed mindset, myself, a negative mindset. Yeah, the gist of the answer is right. So if you're a business owner and your partner, it could be your partner, but you know what the truth is, guys? You know the reality. If you're a business owner or you plan to be one, take your finger and point it to yourself, because you are the only bottleneck in your business. The managing director, the CEO, the GM, whatever title that you're going to have, you are going to be the bottleneck of your business, especially your small business that you're starting up. If you're working alone, you can't blame anybody else. So it's going to be you. You are going to be the bottleneck if you are in that leadership role. All right. And so Tony's got me standing up, and he's asked me that question, and I kind of looked around, and my business partner and colleagues were sitting next to me. I wanted to blame them. It's their fault. They're not doing it. But then I dug a little deeper, and I pointed like this, and I said, it's me, Tony. I'm the managing director. I do actually get to make the decisions. I can make a decision to hire new people. I can make a decision to fire people. I can make a decision to outsource this. I can make a decision to do this and do that. And all of those decision-making processes were sitting with me as the managing director. So for me at that time, and then he did an interesting thing. He got me to stand up, and he got me to shout out at the top of my lungs, something like, I'm an empowered business owner, and I have all of the resources to make the best decisions, something like that. And I shouted this statement out. It was like a mini incantation. I shouted it out, and I shouted it out. And I could feel a physical shift in my body, that I just took ownership of that role of managing director. Now, of course, then as we've set up Coachology a few years after that, that stuck with me, that it truly is 80 to 90% of your business success starts right here. It starts here, because here's the thing. You could have the best strategy in the world. You could have the best roadmap to do everything. But as soon as there's a little hiccup or a bump in the road, you're going to freak out. You're going to let fear and the what if, and you're going to focus on the negative. And even you could have the best plan in the world, you're not going to succeed, right? Or you try to stick to the plan, right? So look at what's happening in the world right now. COVID, lockdown. Literally thousands and millions of companies have had to change their strategic plan in order to survive in the economic environment in the world in which we live in now. There's different ways of doing business. So I'm telling you, those with the mental agility and the resourcefulness to be able to change the plan are the ones that are most successful, right? Another quick example, there's a cafe down the road from my place down here, like a kilometre or two away. From the beginning of lockdown, they put all of their menus online and made it available as home delivery. And every day through the whole lockdown, at its peak of lockdown here in Bangkok, there were at least 10 to 20 Grab motorcycles, the motorcycle delivery guys. They dress them in green here in Bangkok. There were 10 to 20 standing by out the front of this place, waiting to collect the order, and off they go. So the leader in that little cafe, right? They changed their strategy, and they were hugely successful. That didn't come from sticking to their old strategy. That came from a flexible, agile mindset to help them to shift their perspective, and then therefore come up with a new strategy. Makes sense so far, guys? Yes or yes? Cool. All right. So let's have a look at the definition here, because before we get to a strategic plan, we need to have strategic thinking. Remember, the thinking is coming first, then you're going to have your plan, and then you're going to execute with your action. So it all starts here. So focusing more on that 80%, strategic thinking is an intentional and rational thought process that focuses on the analysis of the critical factors. In other words, the things that are most important, the things that move the needle the most. This is what we mean by critical factors, the things that you do really, really good. And the variables that will influence the long-term success of a business or a team or an individual. So again, you can create a strategic plan for yourself, for your team, or for the entire organization. Now, what do we mean by critical success factors? Those critical factors are the ones that make the difference, So as you're beginning to think about your strategic plan, and remember, you need to spend some time thinking about it first and brainstorming and jotting things down. A great place to start is using Pareto's 80-20 rule. Now, if you're not familiar with the 80-20 rule, it basically says that you'll get 80% of your results from 20% of the effort, right? The key effort, the effort that is focused on that critical success. So when you can identify that 20% of that critical success factor that gives you 80% of your rewards or your success, then naturally you want to do more of that 20%, right? Does that make sense? So a lot of leaders, they spend that 80% of the time fiddling around and doing stuff that's only going to give them 20% of the rewards or the success, all right? So Google is your friend. Search 80-20 rule if you want to learn more about that. But the point is, find out what 20% of your efforts are giving you 80% of the rewards, and determine what is it that's giving you the majority of your success, right? Now, success is what success means to you. Your successful business might be revenue. Your successful measurement might be lives impacted, or units sold, or widgets of this, or doodahs of that. You need to decide what success means to you and what 20% of your efforts are resulting in those 80% of the success. You can ask yourself, where or who is your revenue coming from, right? So before you do your strategic plan, you want to, if you've been in business for a while, you want to look at your data, right? You need to pull out your spreadsheets and you need to look who have been your customers in the past, who are the ones that are paying the money, where are they coming from, what's their demographic, what's their age group, what are their interests, and you really need to look at that logically. Remember the definition? You need to look at it with intentional and a rational thought process. So as you're doing this, you're collecting all of this data. And guys, it's not what you think it might be or what you kind of guess it might be or my intuition tells me. No, you want to base this information on fact and data. So you need to look through the books. You need to find out where are your customers coming from, what kind of people are they? Because guess what? Once you know who they are and where they're coming from, then it becomes easier to replicate in the future. And you're taking a lot of the guesswork out of it. Yeah. Cool. So for example, with our corporate training that we offer to organizations, and we do a lot of strategic planning and strategic alignment for big multinational companies. When Christy and I, once a year, we sit down and we do our strategic plan for Coachology, we look at the corporate clients. If I'm talking about kind of in-house training here, who are they? They're multinational companies with a presence here in Asia. And I'm talking to an L&D, a learning and development director, who has been internationally educated somewhere abroad. That is my target market. That is where the majority of our revenue from international organizations is coming through. And if I were to add one more distinction, that organization, they already know and aware of the benefits of coaching their teams, and they have a bit of what we call a growth mindset. They know that there's benefit in investing in training and development for their teams. So that, guess what? When we know that, then that's how, when we're making our strategic plan, our marketing strategies will be designed to attract more of those kind of people. Does that make sense, guys? And you can't know that until you look at the records, until you get really, really clear of your existing clientele and business partners. So again, we're still on critical success factors. What are you really good at? Okay, what do you know that you're really good at? Or what do your clients tell you that you're really good at, right? If, maybe you're a bit shy, oh, not good at anything. I'm just okay. Well, what do your clients tell you that you're good at? Listen to them, because what they're telling you you're good at, that gives you a clue to your critical success factor. What brings you the most joy? Now, that might not be such a relevant question in a big multinational behemoth. And for if you're a solopreneur, you're working by yourself or you're starting your own business, do yourself a favor. Do what brings you joy, you know, and that's what we were fortunate enough to incorporate here at Coachology. We were passionate to support organizations to implement a coaching culture that brings us joy and passion, and we're very fortunate that we're able to do that. So again, being aware of that will determine your planning process. So why is strategic thinking important? Well, as you think strategically, which is kind of like taking a detached perspective, it allows you to anticipate future needs, possible trends or market requirements. It helps you to have a better analysis of the consequences of the thoughts, decisions, and actions. So again, if strategic thinking is kind of like taking that step back from the business, then as you're beginning to think and then make those decisions and plan, you want to have a little bit of that kind of detached or critical thinking where you discuss with your team, okay, if we do this, if this is our decision, what are the possible consequences of those thoughts, decisions, and actions, right? And so you really need to get into that habit of taking the step back, which we'll cover in detail a little bit more in a moment. Strategic thinking is important because it develops greater creativity. Who else can tell me, guys? Pop it into the chat box, please. Why else do you think strategic thinking is important? Now, remember, we haven't got to the strategic planning yet. We're still kind of in this thinking phase because we must develop this strategic thinking, this ability to look objectively and critically and logically in order that we can come up with the best plan. So if anyone else has any suggestions, please pop them in. Strategic thinking is great for your personal development and your business growth. You get to minimize mistakes and drama. So the kind of businesses or leaders that do not have a strategic plan, they're kind of what I call cowboys, right? Or cowgirls. It's like they're from the wild, wild west, and they kind of bang, bang, and they're kind of yeehaw. And they're just kind of, you know, taking almost reckless sometimes actions without really thinking it through. So by thinking strategically, by thinking about the long term, that this action is going to result in this consequences, then you'll be able to minimize the mistakes and you'll be able to minimize the drama. As you have strategic thinking, you're able to better allocate the resources that you have. Right? We don't have unlimited resources. So as you begin thinking strategically and implementing your plan, you're able to better allocate the resources that you have by, again, focusing on that 20% that's going to bring you the 80% of the rewards and the value. Okay, it allows us to be flexible and adaptable. Thank you, Suchi. Minimal action that makes the impact. Yeah, it doesn't have to be hard, right? The whole purpose of strategic thinking and planning is to make it easier. Like, yes, it takes effort to create your strategic plan, but I'm telling you guys, your return on investment of that 1 or 2 days that you put into the strategic plan, it'll save you so much drama and it's going to minimize the action that you need to take. It helps protect yourself and possibly avoid huge errors. Beautiful. Strategic thinking gives us a sense of direction. Here we go. That is the direction, right? And remember, strategic thinking is about covering all aspects, right? You think about this like, okay, so what if we did this? And then here's the consequences or the chain of events. Okay, what if we did this? And then this is the possible. And this is why doing it as a team together with your team is so, so important, because as you get people to share, you get to explore all of those different rabbit holes, right? If we make this, we're going to run down this rabbit hole, or we do this. And that is very, very valuable information. Oh, a couple more. Thank you for lighting up this chat box, guys. It provides the roadmap towards fulfilling the vision. Exactly. The vision, the purpose, right? That's what's going to motivate and inspire your team. So the strategic plan, it's that roadmap from point A to point B. And when you are aligned with your vision and your purpose, the level of fulfillment is huge. To validate our purpose, preparing for the worst case scenarios. Nice one, Kelvin. It's exactly what Christy and I did. On day one of lockdown, back on the 23rd of March, 2020, we sat on the balcony out here and I said, what happens if we don't get any business for a year? Because our traditional business model of face-to-face training, our strategic plan of face-to-face training, it stopped overnight on day one of lockdown. So I said, what's the worst case scenario? How long can we survive and not be paid? And so we calculated that and we thought, okay, we can survive for 1 year before we need to start selling stuff. All right, good. And it was really useful to explore that worst case scenario. Now, I didn't dwell there. We didn't stay there too long, but it definitely created a bit of awareness. And then we asked the question, what can we do? Well, here's what we're doing. We're doing webinars, right? And so that was a real life conversation that we actually had. Resources are limited, but wants are unlimited. So we should have strategic thinking. Beautifully said, Redney. Thank you. Okay, so we also, guys, we cannot solve today's problems at the same level of thinking that created them. So as these problems do pop up, and they will, we need to elevate our thinking, almost like from a helicopter point of view, to adapt these agile strategic thinking concepts. Now, again, I'm borrowing this from Tony Robbins, where he says, work on the business, not in the business. Now, what does he mean by that? Is we're so busy in our day-to-day lives. We're just, it's go, 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 go. And if you're a leader leading a team and you're running a business and you've got responsibility for payroll and this, that, and the other, you are constantly in the business, putting out fires, taking care of customers and doing this and doing that. When it comes to pulling your strategic plan together, you want to work on the business, right? Because if you're in it, it's like you can't see it, right? So you need to take that detached perspective, that helicopter point of view to work on the business, right? So the analogy I like to use here is, imagine you're in Chinatown here in Bangkok. I don't know if you've been to Chinatown in Bangkok. It looks a little bit like this, right? It's so easy to get lost in Chinatown if you've not been there before. It's a series of little alleys and dead-end streets, and you know, you can be in the middle here and you don't know how to get out, right? And this is exactly what it's like to be in the business, right? And again, whether you're yourself or you're a small team or you're an institute or you're an organization, same principles apply. When you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see a way out because you're forever just doing, doing, doing. So to work on the business, imagine if you're in Chinatown and you're lost, you don't know your way out, but you are able to helicopter up from a bird's eye point of view. And from that helicopter perspective, now you can see and you can plot your path to get your way out of Chinatown. And it's the exact same principles with your strategic plan, right? Now, again, we're still implementing strategic thinking principles here, right? But what it is, that strategic thinking is your ability to take that detached point of view, to look at the maze and to try to work your way out, to create that action plan that's going to lead you out towards success. So this is a mental process where you need to be able to have that detached perspective to work on the business, right? So here's a quick list of pros and cons. So if we look at working in the business, which is the kind of traditional model, well, what's good about it? It's really good for getting those daily tasks done. It's really good for getting those repetitive tasks done. You can achieve basic KPIs when you're working in the business, when things are chug, 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 chug. It's good to maintain the current mission, right? So if you don't want anything to change, then that's great. You just keep working in the business. It's really good for mundane work or kind of time-consuming repetitive work. But that's about it, guys. That's about it for working in the business, especially as the leader, right? Remember, you've got your leadership hat on here. So if you're not a leader yet, keep this in your pocket for when you do get promoted to be a leader or when you start your own business. Right, now what's not so good about working in the business? Well, it's hard to know the future plan. It's hard to, to know what that vision is. And if you don't know the vision, if you can't see the vision, then, and you have no purpose, then the motivation for both you and the team is going to dramatically reduce. You'll have a lack of adaptability. So if things do change in the market or the economy or the whatever, you won't have that ability to adapt because why? You're in the business. And when we're in the business, it's like this. You're just focusing on what is immediately in front of you, right? So a few more cons. You have a limited scope for development, both personally, professionally, and as the business. You have a lack of market or competitor awareness. Now, did you know that your competitors and the market out there, they can be your best teacher, right? So when you have, for example, whenever Christy and I do our strategic plan for Coachology, one of the first things we do in preparing for our strategic retreat is that we will look at the competition. Or I'll have one of my assistants to go online and I'll get them to gather some data and some information. What kind of courses are they doing? How does their website look like? What's going on with here? What are the price points of this, that, and the other? Because you can get a lot of information if, again, you can step out of the day-to-day and look at what's happening in the market around you. There'll be no creativity if you're stuck in the business. You'll kind of do as you're told mentality, right? Like I'll do as you're told. And so you won't question the big boss. You'll, yes, boss, I'll do it. Right? Now, if we compare that to working on the business, the pros and cons, well, when you do take that helicopter perspective, you're able to foresee challenges and obstacles, right? Not all of them, of course. I don't think anyone predicted COVID and the lockdowns that have been going on for a year and a half now. But certainly from that helicopter perspective, you're able to better observe those challenges and obstacles. It gives you greater agility. So when things do go wrong, and then you take that helicopter perspective, that agility allows you to change course or change direction as needed. You can adapt to market needs. You'll have better allocation of resources. It creates more motivation, especially when you do this with your team, right? When you create a strategic plan and a strategic alignment session with your team, well, it's the opportunity to share with them or remind them of the vision and the mission and the purpose. It's an opportunity to get information and data from them. It's an opportunity to brainstorm together and share with them why we do what we do, which is your purpose. So as you do that with your team, they're in the boat, right? You're in the boat and now you're rowing in the same direction. Including the team for better synergy. Focus on the things that make the biggest difference. So again, when we're in it so much, we don't really know what is the thing that critical success factor. But when we take that step back and we can go, whoa, yeah, interesting. That's the thing that makes the difference. Then what do? You do more of that. You just do more of that. See new perspectives. Now, I can't think of many cons when I think about working on the business. It does take a little bit of time, and it might take, if you've got a team, it might take you kind of a couple of days of work to kind of collect the data and to do the research and get all of the information first. But that can be done an hour here and an hour there on the lead up to your strategic retreat. And then, of course, you've got the 1 or 2 days. You might have a hotel cost or whatever. Guys, you're going to get your return on investment of whatever you put into your strategic planning process. Right. So any questions so far? No. If you have any questions, guys, pop them into the chat box. So how am I going for time? Oh, so quickly. So chunking. Chunking is a concept from the world of neuro-linguistic programming. And it is kind of how we think. And as we think in these different chunks of information, we can also plan in these chunks of information. So chunking, as a quick definition, is the grouping together of information into ideally sized pieces. Now, what is an ideally sized piece? Well, it depends on what you're working on, right? But basically, it's taking information and it's putting it into a chunk, a nice, manageable, understandable chunk of information. So just imagine a little box with information in there, and that ideal piece of information can be understood by whoever needs to understand it, right? And I've got some examples. It's okay. All right, now I want someone to unmute themselves here, and I want to do this as a quick exercise. So I just need one of you. Who can remember their childhood phone number when you were a kid growing up? Who could? Okay, Jess, go ahead and unmute
New
yourself,
visitor.
please. And
Yes.
tell me, Jess, in a nice, clear voice, can you recite for me your childhood telephone number?
My childhood telephone number.
Please.
Telephone number
Yes.
02
02.
438 7255.
Okay, say it one more time. 02
438
438, yeah,
7255.
7255.
Yes.
02, blah, 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 right? Now, did you notice Jess had split her phone number into 3 chunks? Now, it's probably a long time since you've remembered that number, right, Jess? Yet this is how the
Yes.
brain works. It loves chunks of 3, right? Let's get one more example. Who else can remember their childhood number?
Me,
Yes, go ahead, me.
Farhana,
Hey, tell me your childhood phone number.
New visitor.
0172-630-2491.
Very good. And how would you say it a little bit slower? Just slow it down for me a little bit.
017
017.
2630-2491.
There we go. Look at that. Chunks of 3 again, right? So this is how we're wired. The human brain is really good at breaking down a complicated thing like a phone number into these easy chunks to remember, these ideal pieces of information. Does that make sense, guys? Right? So let's take a look at a couple more examples. Recipes. Recipes are an example of chunks where they'll give you, you might have a list of ingredients, then they give you some instructions, and then they say, do this, right? So it's a step-by-step process broken down into bite-sized chunks that the human brain can understand, right? Here's another example. This is mind mapping. So for those of you who've done any mind mapping before, you'll have one idea, okay? And that's kind of like the key idea. And then you'll do little sub ideas off that. And this is what we call now chunking down, right? So you've got this big idea here, but then you chunk down into smaller ideas that are related to that one. But then you have a totally different idea, which is the second idea. And then you chunk down into more details and more specifics of that. So what I'm getting at here, there is lots of examples where we're already unconsciously using this process of chunking, right? And here's the final example, an organizational chart, where you've got the big boss at the top here, all right? you've got his or her department heads or executives or head of department, however you want to call them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then under those people, you have their direct reports who report to that head of department or that manager or leader. Does that make sense, guys? Right? So generally, when we talk about chunking, we move from what we call a big chunk, right, which is the big picture, which is the vision, it's the purpose, it's the overall goal that you want to achieve for the organization, and we call that a big chunk, right? There's a lot of information in there. Then we kind of can chunk down into the details, into the small chunk and the specifics and the who and the when and the details, right? So if you want to create an awesome strategic plan, you need to be able to think strategically, and to be able to think strategically is to be flexible in the way that you think, the way that you can move from big and kind of vague pieces of information down into the very specific details of the information. So if you wanted to chunk up or to get the bigger picture, some questions you can ask are, for what purpose? Why? For what intention? And this is an example of what? And I've got another example here in a moment, guys, so it'll make a little bit more sense. But sometimes we need to chunk up. And if you're the leader and you're going to lead your team through this strategic planning process, it's really important to understand the mechanics of this chunking. Remember, chunking information. And sometimes you do from the strategic plan. If this is the goal, we want to make $1 million in 1 year. That's the big chunk. How do we do that? Well, guess what? We need to chunk down. We need to say what specifically, who specifically, when specifically. What do you mean? What is this an example of? What kind of actions are we going to take? Who is going to help us? And you begin to get down into the details. All right. Now let's take a look at here of an example, and you can put your answers into the chat box or you can unmute yourself. So here I want to chunk up. So I'm going to ask the question here, marketing is an example of what? Marketing is an example of what, guys? What do you think? Why do we market? Why would we do any marketing? What is our intention behind marketing? Who can tell me? Anyone?
And it's a necessity also.
Awareness. Yeah. Okay. I like awareness. Generate sales. Close. Generate sales is going to be chunking down. Oh, I love all of these insights. Okay. Let's follow me here, guys. Marketing is an example of influence, right? So influence is the higher chunk. You want to influence people to buy your product or service, yes? So how do we influence? Well, we need to do a marketing strategy. So marketing is kind of the how of doing influence. Now, marketing itself, it's still a big chunk, right? How do we do marketing? There's so many bits and pieces. So clearly we need to chunk down to get into the specifics of how are we going to market. So the question to ask ourselves here are, what are some examples of marketing, right? So one example of marketing, go ahead, pop it into the chat box, guys, nice and quick. What are some examples of marketing? Yep, nice one, Max. Social media, right? So social media is an example of marketing. Now, are there many different types of social media, guys? Yes or no? Okay, so tell me, what are some examples of social media, right? So we're chunking down here. Tell me, guys, in the chat box, what are some examples of social media? Instagram, TikTok, TV ads, Facebook, video, Facebook, yeah, Reels, newspapers, right? So here are just some examples of marketing, right, sorry, of social media specifically, yeah? So when we talk about social media, we've got YouTube, we've got Instagram, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Twitter, and of course the big one, Facebook. Now, if we look at Facebook for an example, guys, what are some examples of some of the things that we can do on Facebook in order to be able to market to our audience, right? In other words, can we chunk down further in Facebook? Of course we can. There's literally 100 different things we can do on Facebook. You might decide to do some organic posts, right? Which is where you might upload some pictures or an article, or you might write a story or whatever. And that's what we call organic, where you do not pay. Or with Facebook, a different chunk, right? Which what we call a sideways chunk or a parallel chunk might be paid advertising, right?
New
Now,
visitor.
did you know within Facebook, there are many different types of paid advertising? You might choose to do a Facebook event. You might choose to do what they call a contact form. You might choose to do what they call retargeting and so on. Now, did you know from those paid ads, you can chunk down even further and you can decide, do you want to target men or women? What age group do you want to target? What country do they live in? And then you can chunk down even further and begin to search for their interests, such as, are they interested in coaching, or are they interested in NLP? Are they interested in flowers or whatever? So this ability to move right through these different levels of chunk is an essential part of the strategic thinking that you need to have in order to successfully create a strategic plan. Does this make sense so far, guys? Yes or yes? Yep, groups, pages, nice one, Max. Yep, live stream, that's another one. Yep, beautiful. Good. All right, now, in its simplicity, guys, this is the template that you can use for your strategic plan, whether you're doing it for yourself, for your team, or for your entire organization. Now, I know some of our beautiful community on the call, they've already seen this before. If you've attended a training with us, I know that you know what this is. So let's do a quick recap for the benefit of everyone. Over here, guys, and you can take a screenshot now if you like. Over here, guys, is the SMART goal, right? I've talked about SMART goals in another webinar, I think, before. So you've got to make sure whatever goal that you want to achieve, remember, what is your goal? That's point B. Point A is where you are now. Point B is your goal. Now, is it your individual goal, your department goal, your organizational goal, whatever, you're going to put it right there. Then you're going to ask your team, why is achieving that goal important? Okay. And again, we'll save that for another webinar. But here's where it gets interesting, guys. You will then do some brainstorming with your team. And I'm going to cover some brainstorming tips in a moment. But as you do your brainstorming, you're simply going to ask the team, hey team, what do we need to do to achieve this goal? Right? So clearly here, the goal is the big chunk. It's the big goal. It's the target that we want to achieve. Now you're going to brainstorm, and then you're going to ask your team to prioritize the top 3 priorities, the top 3 actions that we need to take to achieve that goal. So guess what? Priority number 1 goes here. Priority number 2 right there in the second spot, and priority number 3 right here. Now, this is where most brainstorming and strategic planning falls down and does not work. The reason why, guys, is this chunk level, it's still too vague, right? It's not clear enough. It's not specific enough. And because it's not specific, no one is really taking action on it, especially if this is the departmental goal or the organizational goal. So what do? With priority number 1, you simply ask yourself, what do we need to do to achieve priority number 1? So in other words, priority number 1 becomes like the sub goal. And then these 1, 2, and 3, these become the specific actions in order to achieve this sub goal. And guess what? Priority number 2 has 3 little actions, and priority number 3 has 3 little actions. So guess what? This priority plus this one equals the achievement of your goal. And do you notice here, we put it in chunks of 3. Why? Because that's how the human brain works. And if you are leading a team, because here's the beautiful thing, this same template you can use at the organizational level, the departmental level, or the individual level as a KPI, right? A key performance indicator. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have who is going to take that action and by when are they going to take that action. All right, now I've got a little example here. This was the action plan that I created for Coachology about 4 years ago when we first started. So our goal back then, Coachology achieves 1 million USD in sales by the 1st of June 2019. Why do we do that? Because we wanted to positively impact 50,000 people and the companies they work with, and for personal and professional growth, both for me and my wife, Christy, and for the clients that we're working with. Then we did some brainstorming. And here was the first most important priority we came up with. Increase marketing actions to create greater awareness, to begin to influence the world around us. Now, again, this is where most people stop. But you can see it's like, yeah, increase marketing. Yeah, okay, how, right? How are we going to do that? So this is where you need to continue to chunk down and say, okay, what specific actions do we need to take to increase marketing actions to create greater awareness? Well, I need to do an e-book and to create an app for people to download for free. By when and who is going to do that? Send weekly newsletters and LinkedIn articles, by when and by who, and allocate a monthly budget to Google, AdWords, and Facebook of $200 a month. Now, let's take a look at this here, guys. Let me ask you this question. Can I chunk down further from these actions here? Yes or no? Can I chunk down further from these actions? Yes or no? Yeah. Definitely, right? Definitely. Like, what kind of content am I going to write? What kind of pictures are we going to use? Right? But remember, this is at the organizational level. So it's still a little bit vague, right? It's still a little bit big picture. But if I had a marketing director, I would say to the marketing director, hey, here are your 3 key actions, the ebook and the app, the newsletters and the budget. I want you to go and create an action plan that tells me how specifically you're going to do that. What ads are you going to create? What are you going to spend on this? What are you going to spend on that? And so on, right? Then, if we keep moving down, deliver amazing training, create public programs and high-end courses, and then you can see I've got specific actions there. So to deliver an amazing training, for example, increase activities inside of the training by 20%. In my experience, when there's a training with lots of action, that's an amazing training. Yeah. Check in with the project lead for regular feedback. So even at the morning tea break, whoever was the key person in the room, I would pull them aside at the morning tea break, and I'd say, how are we going? Any feedback for me? Any suggestions? Anything you'd like me to change or improve? And I would get that direct feedback even before the training was finished, so that I could make the adjustments as we went, to make sure that I would get 90% plus in the evaluations at the end of the day, right? And then again, by when and by who. Now, here's the thing, guys. This same template you can use at absolutely any level of the organization.
New visitor.
Now, very quickly, if you're going to be brainstorming, because that's what you need to do in order to be able to fill out your action plan, if you have a team, you're going to need to do some brainstorming. Now, let me let you in on a secret. Most brainstorming doesn't work very well.
New visitor.
Because oftentimes the people start arguing about which idea is more important. So the brainstorming needs to happen first, and then the prioritization needs to follow after that. So if you're going to do effective brainstorming, safe space, and make sure the ego is outside of the room, what we call psychological safety. No judgment, right? During the brainstorming, you want all of the ideas, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Ensure everyone in the team contributes, and prioritize later as a separate process. Because here's the thing, if during the brainstorming, if people start having a conversation, what they're really trying to do is they're saying that this idea is better than that idea. But you want to keep that separate, right? During the brainstorming, you actually don't want really people talking too much, except the person that's giving the idea. So you go, yes, what's your idea? Yes, give me one. Okay, what is it? And you're going to write them down and write them down. Then you can prioritize, right? And again, that's probably a discussion for another time. The quickest way, guys, is probably democracy, right? Get people to vote, right, on which idea is best, and open up a mature adult conversation if there happens to be a disagreement on which is the priority, right? Guys, 98% of problems in an organization can be resolved with clear and direct communication. So, but if you've set the scene and you've created that safe environment where people can share, then you actually want to encourage those adult conversations when it comes to the prioritization. Just remember though, brainstorming, prioritization are two separate chunks. Yeah, cool. Now, how does this all come together then as a strategic plan? Well, guess what? The organizational strategic plan, right, which is going to look something like this, that sits at the top, and the big boss is ultimately responsible for the overall strategic plan. But guess what? The big boss has probably got some managers under him or her, whether you call it a head of department or an executive or a team leader or whatever they are. This department's action plan plus this department's action plan plus this one are going to result in the achievement of the strategic plan. In other words, their three contributions, that is the results that you want to achieve as an organization. And if you've got 5 departments, then of course you just put 5 departments across there. That's totally cool. Then within each department, you're going to have the individuals inside of that team. And chances are each individual, whether they're in sales or marketing or operations or customer service, it does not matter. Chances are they have a KPI, or at the very minimum, a job description that they need to fulfill in order to achieve that departmental success. So this individual's KPI plus this one equals the achievement of your departmental KPI. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah? Good. All right. Looks like I'm going to run a couple of minutes over. So let's just wrap this up here nice and quick. A couple of tips, guys, when you're going to do your strategic plan, especially if you're in an existing organization or institute. Do yourself a favor. Change the environment, right? Remember, we talked about working on the business, not in the business. Well, if you're trying to save cost and you're trying to do the strategic plan inside the same place where they're doing their daily work, there's going to be distractions all around, right? So do yourself a favor and go off site, wherever that needs to be. You don't need to spend millions of dollars. You can go to the cafe down the road. You can take them to a hotel for the weekend or for the end of the week. Change the environment, however you want to do it. I've done it outside sitting by the swimming pool before, right? Just simply change your environment. Work on the business, not in it. So what does that mean? During the day or two when you're doing your strategic plan, don't be checking emails every 5 minutes. Don't be checking social media every 5 minutes. Don't be trying to organize things. Give yourself the emotional permission to take that step out of the business for 1 or 2 days to work on the business, not in it. So put your autoresponder on, turn your phone to silent, do whatever you need to do to minimize or eliminate all of those distractions. Then it's really good practice to acknowledge the wins, right? So what do I mean by that? This might be the first time that you're doing a strategic plan with your team, or maybe you had a bit of a rough year, or whatever the situation. Acknowledge the wins, right? So how do you do that? You say to everyone, okay, guys, take 2 minutes down, and I want you to just write down for yourself, what are you really proud of? What wins did we have? What successes did we have this year? Go ahead and write them down. And so you get everyone to write them down individually first, because that kind of helps get the juices flowing. And then you get people to share, right? So you say, okay, Mary, tell me one of your wins for the year. What are you happy about? What are you proud about? And then you write it down on a flip chart, and you get everyone to share. And then you go around the group 2 or 3 or 4 times, whatever you feel is appropriate. What does that do? It gets people in a good mood. It helps them remember that, yes, we have been successful in some areas. And so it helps them to be in a more motivated emotional state, which, remember, if creating your strategic plan is 80% mindset, you want them to be in a good mood, right? If everyone's sitting there like this, then the quality of your strategic plan is probably going to be pretty horrible. Yeah. Then as you go through, you want to focus on the most important things. Okay. So you will have done some research. You would have gathered some data before you came to the meeting, right? So make sure before your strategic retreat, make sure that someone has done all the research and gathered all the data so that you've got that data. Don't be doing that on the first 2 hours of the strategic retreat. That will kill the mood, and the creativity is going to die. Make sure you set that up in advance. Then you'll have a chance to look through that information, and you can find what are the most important things. Where are those critical success factors, and how can we do more of that, right? Now, conversely, the most important thing might have been that big problem that you had. So then if that's the most important thing that held your business back, then clearly you need to address that as one of the most important things, right? Then you're going to do your brainstorming, and then you're going to come up with your action plan. When possible and when appropriate, you may want to include an outsider, which could be a trusted friend or colleague. It could be an associate. It could be, you know, it can be anyone. Obviously, someone who knows a little bit about business might be useful. And then if you wanted to engage with an external facilitator, such as myself or Christy, then obviously that will speed up the process. Why? Because we have a process to follow. Cool, cool.
New
so
visitor.
I hope that all makes sense, everyone. Any comments or questions? The 5th point is great. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome, guys. So listen, that's it for today. A lot of the knowledge that I've got for delivering my strategic plan for my own company and for the multinational organizations that I've worked with around the region come from the world of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Chunking is just one part of it. In NLP, there's over 30 modules that you can learn for your communication, your EQ, and your leadership. So our next session is coming up on the 11th to 15th of November here in Bangkok, or you can join us virtually from anywhere around the world. And your special investment is just 50,000 baht. And we do have a monthly payment plan available as well. And for those of you looking to become a professional coach, we have our ICF Leadership Coaching certification on 20 to 21 of November with, again, a special investment there of 55,000 or a monthly payment plan. So I'm going to email the details to you guys. I'll also send you instructions on how to access this recording if you want to share it with your friends or your colleagues. I hope that you have enjoyed the session as much as I have today. As always, it is the quickest day, the quickest hour of my week, that's for sure. I'm just quickly pulling up the chat box here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, guys. Wonderful to see some familiar faces, and thanks, guys. Stay safe, stay awesome, keep on coaching, and you know where to find me if you have any questions. We'd be happy to support you guys some way, somehow. Until the next time, stay awesome. Ciao, ciao. Thank you.